Okay, let's unpack this. When you think of ancient Greece, what typically springs to mind?
Right, probably, the big marble temples, groundbreaking philosophy.
The very cradle of democracy, right? We often get this picture of a golden age, all intellectual brilliance.
Exactly, but that bright light, well, it can blind us to some really profound, often horrific shadows underneath.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into an aspect of the classical world that's, let's say, frequently glossed over, but it was undeniably foundational to its society.
Absolutely foundational.
Our source material for this deep dive is it's a powerfully reconstructed narrative. It's been meticulously woven together from primary historical accounts, legal documents from the time.
And it takes us on a journey through what's described as the tragic life of a male concubine in ancient Greece.
And that term, concubine, it's specific here, isn't it? We're talking about young male slaves, often called paves.
Yes, exactly. Acquired not just for household chores, but specifically to fulfill sexual roles for their masters, and sometimes their guests, too.
This account, wow. It reveals a stark, brutal reality that honestly challenges a lot of what we think we know.
It really does.
Our mission today is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from this incredibly vivid material. We want to understand not just what happened, but how this cruelty was so systemic.
And why it mattered then, definitely. But also why its echoes still feel so chilling today.
It's a story of forced survival, systematic dehumanization, and just profound societal contradictions. And you, our listener, you're joining us on this exploration of history's often hidden, uncomfortable truths.
So where do we begin? The path into this life.
Let's start there. Imagine a world where your family's survival is just hanging by a thread. A bad harvest, an injury. Anything could push you right to the brink.
Yeah.
Our deep dive starts with this harsh reality. The circumstances that force countless young people into situations that are just unthinkable.
What's immediately striking reading this is just how prevalent enslavement was, and often stemming directly from what the source calls the nice edge of survival in rural Greek villages.
So it wasn't always like pirate raids or conquest.
Not always, no. Often, it was purely economic desperation. Families faced these impossible choices when debt collectors showed up, and they were seeking payment literally in flesh.
That's horrific.
It is. The account gives this heart-wrenching scene. A small farming community hit by drought, wells dry, crops failing. What do?
Sell everything you own, I suppose?
Right. They'd sell livestock, then maybe precious jewelry. And when even that was gone, our material reveals they'd start looking at their children with different eyes.
Oh.
We meet this 12-year-old boy. His father won't meet your eyes as he negotiates your price. His mother turns away when the merchant examines your teeth like you're a horse.
Just like property from the start?
Precisely. And the payment. Enough silver to keep a family fed through winter. In exchange for 20 years of service.
20 years for a child. And you mentioned this wasn't rare, debt bondage.
No, historical records suggest it was a significant pathway into slavery. Estimates indicate a really substantial portion of Athens' population were slaves, and many got there exactly like this.
And then the lies. The source mentions lies that fall from their lips like honey from a broken comb.
Oh, yes. Promises of temporary work, maybe learning valuable skills,
Right.
a glorious return home, wealthy.
But the reality?
The path to the city is described as a nightmare of chained necks and blistered feet, a human caravan.
A human caravan.
And the source puts it so powerfully. Hope is just another word for future disappointment.
Yeah.
It's such a vivid, heartbreaking picture, the loss of everything familiar.
And that journey often ended up where the slave market.
Usually, yes, the slave market in Athens, which this material describes as an assault on every sense.
How so?
Hundreds of voices shouting, the
then-
smell,
Yeah.
overwhelming, unwashed bodies, fear, sweat, urine. And then just the sight of naked bodies arranged in rows like merchandise.
Like merchandise.
Buyers, described as circling like sharks, would prod and poke, check for disease or injury. They're evaluating potential for different kinds of service.
And the source mentions different types of buyers.
Yeah, our deep dive identifies 3 distinct categories here. Some wanted muscle and endurance for farm work.
Okay, makes sense.
Others look for compliance, intelligence, a certain fragility for household service.
Right.
Inside the home.
Right. And the third.
And then there's a third category, men who dress in fine clothing and speak with cultured accents. They're looking for a combination of youth and beauty that has nothing to do with labor and everything to do with pleasure.
This is where it gets really dark.
It does. And the next layer our deep dive uncovers is truly chilling. Our subject, the young boy from the village.
Yes.
He's cleaned and oiled before the sale, marked as too pretty for field work. He's positioned not with the laborers, but with the household slaves.
Setting him apart visually.
Exactly. The auctioneer's voice booms out, describing his pleasing appearance and gentle temperament.
Code words.
Absolute code words. And certain buyers lean forward. He's purchased by a man named Lysander. Middle-aged, wealthy, soft hands, and eyes that seem already possessing you.
It's just genuinely disturbing to think about these, architects of civilization and this kind of cruelty side by side.
It is.
So what was life like inside a wealthy Athenian home like Lysander's for someone in his position?
Well, the house itself, our material notes, was the spectacle. Marble columns, painted walls, elaborate mosaics. Impressive.
But behind the facade.
But this new, brutal reality was dictated by Demetrius, the overseer. Interestingly, a former slave himself who managed the household with an iron fist.
An iron fist. What were the rules?
Demetrius laid them down immediately, fed twice daily, clean clothes weekly, bathed and sleep only when ordered.
Total control.
Complete control. Speak only when spoken to. Never look a free person directly in the eyes. Never refuse an order, no matter what that order might be.
No matter what.
And then the chilling line. You are here to serve the master and his guests in whatever capacity they require. This service may involve providing entertainment.
Entertainment.
The nature of which Demetrius apparently explained with a cruel smile will become clear in time.
God, where did they live? The slaves.
The new quarters were small cells in the basement, specifically designed, the source notes, to muffle sound.
To muffle sound. That's ominous.
Extremely. And the other slaves there, Marcus, Alexios, young Philemon, they quickly teach him what really happens during the symposiums. A brutal education in survival begins.
The symposium. We're often taught about that as the sophisticated gathering, right? Educated men debating philosophy, politics.
That's the standard picture, yes.
What does this narrative reveal about the hidden reality?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the symposium is maybe the starkest example of ancient Greek society's core contradiction.
Absolutely.
While it was publicly revered, intellectually stimulating conversations between the greatest minds, the reality, especially when the wine flowed freely and guests demanded more intimate entertainment, could be very different.
So the image and the reality diverge sharply.
Dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
This material exposes that, quote, the philosophers who debated the nature of virtue and justice by day had no qualms about using young slaves for their pleasure by night.
The very same men, the ones shaping Western thought.
Often, yes. Simultaneously complicit in and frequently direct perpetrators of this horrific exploitation. It's a difficult truth.
How did these evenings unfold, according to the source?
It details the preparation rituals, slaves bathed, oiled, given thin, clinging tunics, sometimes golden bracelets or necklaces that mark them as ornamental
Objects.
Essentially. The evening would start formally, discussing democracy, the philosophy of Socrates maybe. But as the wine took effect,
Things changed.
the whole tone shifted. Philosophical discussions give way to cruder entertainment, stories become bawdy, intellectual debates devolve into boastful competition.
And the slaves, serving silently.
Until they weren't serving silently anymore, they become the center of attention. It might start with small requests, pouring wine, massaging someone's shoulders, feeding grapes.
Innocent enough on the surface.
But you quickly learn to read the signs. The source describes the lingering touches that have nothing to do with serving wine, the way certain guests watch your movements with predatory interest. It's a terrifying education in navigating constant threat.
And then the special service.
The description of the first time is harrowing. A guest, old enough to be his grandfather, invites him over. Seems friendly initially, but his hand slowly moves to your back, then lower. Protests are ignored. Struggles are actually met with laughter from the other guests.
Laughter.
His childhood ends in the most brutal way possible. Afterwards, the source finds him lying in his cell, just trying desperately to understand how the world could contain such cruelty.
It's unimaginable. And it wasn't just the physical abuse, was it? The source talks about psychological warfare.
Absolutely. A systematic, insidious psychological warfare. How did masters break their slaves, not just physically, but spiritually? That's a key part of this.
How did they do it?
This raises a really important question about the nature of dehumanization itself. The psychological techniques were, as the source puts it, as sophisticated as they are cruel.
Sophisticated how?
Well, isolation was paramount, cutting slaves off from everything, familiar language, family, home. Then, unpredictability, creating this chronic fear that wears down resistance.
Constant anxiety.
Exactly. But maybe, the source suggests, the most insidious technique is the destruction of identity.
How did they destroy identity?
Our material shows they'd literally take away a slave's name, give them a Greek one, forbid their native language, their customs, dress them in Greek clothes, feed them Greek food, force them to worship Greek gods.
Erasing them?
Slowly, systematically, they erase everything that made you who you were. It wasn't just about control, it was manufacturing a new identity, one that was purely functional, devoid of personal history or autonomy.
And the men doing this, who were they? You mentioned philosophers.
They were, in many cases, the absolute cream of Athenian society. This account actually names names, reconstructed from records. Dionyso, a respected politician known for speeches on justice and civic virtue.
But in private.
In private, he delights in humiliating young slaves. Cleomenes, a wealthy merchant praised for his generosity.
Let me guess.
His charitable reputation masks a taste for violence. And maybe most disturbing of all is Sophist, a philosopher who writes treatises on ethics and the nature of the good life.
And yet
He justifies every cruelty with elaborate philosophical arguments.
that's profoundly unsettling. How could they reconcile this? The intellectual brilliance and the monstrous behavior. Was it this moral blindness you mentioned?
It seems that way. In their minds, slaves existed in a completely different moral category than free citizens. The virtues, the ethics that applied to equals, they simply didn't extend to property.
So it wasn't hypocrisy in their eyes. It was just a different set of rules.
Exactly. This moral blindness was structural, it wasn't accidental, it was an elaborate, deeply embedded system of justification. And if we look at the economics,
Yes.
the leisure time that allowed free citizens to pursue intellectual and artistic endeavors was built squarely on the backs of slave labor.
So their civilization depended on it.
The very foundation of their celebrated civilization was intrinsically linked to this dehumanization. They almost had to see slaves this way to maintain their way of life.
That explanation of moral blindness is incredibly clear, terrifyingly so. But I wonder, did any contemporary voices or texts you looked at challenge this, even implicitly? Or was this view just totally pervasive among the elite?
It's a great question. From our deep dive into these sources, it really appears that while you might find rare philosophical arguments for, say, the humane treatment of slaves don't beat them too much, perhaps the fundamental institution of slavery itself was rarely, if ever, directly challenged by the elite.
So managing the property better, maybe, but not questioning ownership.
Pretty much. The moral blindness was deeply ingrained. It was a societal norm that allowed them to just compartmentalize their philosophical ideals from their practical, brutal realities.
Okay, so in these utterly brutal conditions, the human spirit still finds ways to survive somehow.
Remarkably, yes.
What kind of survival strategies did these young men develop, according to the source?
The boy in our story, he learns. He learns to read the subtle signs, to anticipate danger. He masters what the source calls psychological absence.
Psychological absence.
Appearing compliant on the outside, fulfilling commands, but retreating so deeply into himself that his spirit remains, in a way, untouchable. Dissociation as a shield.
But that must take a toll.
Oh, absolutely. Survival comes at a cost. Each compromise, each act of submission chips away at something essential inside you. He eventually becomes this hollow-eyed young man who moves through life like a ghost haunting his own body.
A ghost. Did they find any solace with each other, the other slaves?
Yes, that's crucial. The other slaves became your only family. Bound by this shared trauma, they communicated through a silent language of glances and gestures.
A hidden community.
Exactly. They'd share food when they could, offer comfort, literally hold each other when the nightmares become too much to bear. It's in these hidden corners, these small acts, that you see glimmers of real humanity and resilience pushing back.
But the source also mentions a kind of psychological death.
Yes, a point where the boy almost stops seeing himself as a person entirely. He becomes exactly what they see, a thing that exists for their amusement.
He internalizes their view of him.
In a twisted way, yes. He becomes the perfect slave, utterly compliant. And he's even rewarded with small comforts for it. But even in this numbness, fragments of awareness still persist. Little sparks.
Like what?
There's this really poignant moment. He's accompanying the overseer, Demetrius, back to the slave market.
Oh, wow. Full circle.
Yeah. And there he sees a young boy who reminds you powerfully of your younger self. Just for a moment, something stirs in the deadness behind your ribs, a recognition that his stolen life, his original self, had value.
That must have been dangerous.
Incredibly dangerous. It awakens memories, his mother's cooking, his father's laugh, things he'd buried, These are the sparks that start to maybe reignite some sense of self, however painful.
And this leads to a realization.
It does. Later, during another symposium, he's listening to the philosophers debate justice and the ideal state. Same old routine.
Right.
But this time, something clicks. He realizes their philosophical sophistication doesn't excuse their cruelty. It makes it worse.
Worse? How?
Because they have the intellectual capacity to understand wrongness. They debate ethics, yet they choose evil anyway. This insight it's a crucial turning point, a reclaiming of his own moral compass, even in his powerless state.
Wow. So years pass, his usefulness in his master's eyes inevitably declines. What happens then?
As you'd expect in such a system. He's eventually deemed to have depreciated below the cost of maintenance. Brutal economic calculation.
And sold off.
Sold to a mining operation in the mountains. The source called it the place where slaves go to die slowly.
The mines. I've heard they were lethal.
Absolutely. The work was backbreaking, conditions lethal, life expectancy measured in months. It's presented as the final, brutal chapter, the end of the line.
But there's a moment just before he goes, with Marcus.
Yes. On his last night in the house, Marcus, another slave he'd formed a bond with, presses a small piece of metal sharpened to a point into his hand.
A weapon or a tool?
Both. A tool that could open either locks or veins. It's described as a gift of options. Escape, maybe revenge, or suicide. A final desperate flicker of agency offered by a fellow sufferer.
My God. What did he do? What was his final act, his last choice in a life that had so few?
He chooses. None of those immediate options, not for himself.
Yeah.
Instead, he hides the weapon where other slaves might find it. He decides to pass along the gift of options that Marcus gave you.
Wow. Even then, thinking of others.
Even then, he takes the journey to the mines almost as goodbye to the world you're leaving. Remembering small things when you dreamed of flying, his mother's garden. In this act, there's a quiet defiance, a kind of legacy.
And the mining camp itself? Was it just utter despair?
It was horrific, described as a final circle of hell. But even there, he finds a new, unexpected kind of society among the slaves.
How so?
They share food, take turns supporting those too weak to work. They maintain elaborate networks of communication, small acts of solidarity in the face of death.
And crucially,
most importantly, they remember. They tell stories of their past lives, the names of loved ones. They preserve forbidden languages. His own story, the source suggests, becomes part of this underground oral history.
so he wasn't entirely forgotten.
Not by them. He dies quietly in the darkness, eventually, surrounded by fellow slaves who promise to remember your name and carry your story forward.
That's something. A shred of dignity preserved by collective memory.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that stories like his have no true endings. They just echo through generations, whispered in the shadows where power doesn't want to look.
And the insight from this account isn't just about the misery.
No, it's about how intellectually brilliant individuals, the founders of so much we admire, actually engineered and justified that misery. They integrated it as a foundational, not incidental, part of their celebrated civilization.
The contradictions weren't bugs, they were features.
Exactly, they were complementary aspects of the same system. The philosophy and the brutality weren't opposed. They coexisted and, in a way, enabled each other.
And those echoes, as you say, they aren't just faint whispers from long ago. What this tragic life shows us with such chilling clarity is how the human capacity for justification enables systemic cruelty.
Yes, and that specific mechanism, that ability to compartmentalize ethics, to create other categories of human beings, it continues to manifest today, often in ways we overlook.
It really raises an important question for us now, doesn't it? We live in a world where powerful people still exploit the powerless, where societies still build their comfort on others' suffering.
The source draws a direct, provocative line. It says, the same moral blindness that allowed Greek intellectuals to torture slaves while writing about virtue allows modern citizens to enjoy products made by child labor while advocating for human rights.
That's a heavy parallel.
It is. The evolution of human cruelty, the source suggests, tends toward refinement rather than elimination.
Refinement, meaning?
Systems become more complex, justifications more sophisticated. Think about that specific mechanism of intellectual justification we saw in Greece, articulating grand ideals while dehumanizing a group for gain.
Okay.
You can see parallels, can't you?
Right.
And how contemporary discussions around certain labor practices or digital exploitation or economic inequalities are sometimes framed. The systems look different, but the underlying psychological patterns of rationalization, they can seem disturbingly familiar.
The boy whose story we followed. He died, forgotten by official history. His name lost, his suffering unrecorded by the powerful.
But his experience, as the source concludes, echoes in the voices of everyone who has ever been treated as less than human for someone else's benefit.
The question then isn't whether such things still happen. The source is clear. They do. Constantly, everywhere, hidden in plain sight by our collective willingness to look away.
Right. The real question for you, the listener, is whether we'll continue this ancient tradition of moral blindness, telling ourselves comfortable lies about progress.
Or whether we'll finally acknowledge that the price of our civilization, perhaps much like Athens, has always been paid by those who had no choice in the transaction. The marble halls still echo, the beautiful mosaics still conceal stains.
And somewhere in our own gleaming cities, maybe the same ancient horrors wear new faces, while the essential capacity for justified cruelty remains unchanged, demanding our attention, demanding we actually see it.